multiverse is real.
What's up everyone and welcome to Screen Crush. I am Ryan Airy and we are here to break down all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. There is going to be a lot to go over with this one, and we are going to bring you a ton of explainer and theory videos in the next few days. We've actually already posted our ending explained, which goes over the post credits, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss anything. Now, let's do this. The film opens in the Gap Junction where America Chavez and a strange variant called Defender Strange are fighting off monsters and demons that were sent by Wanda. And 10 years ago, that sentence would not have made any sense at all. They're after the Book of Vishanti, which is, it's like the ultimate good book in Marvel that has the most powerful white magic spells in the universe. In the comics, it was written by Agamotto, one of the first Sorcerer Supremes who also created the Eye of Agamotto. In the MCU, this is the relic that used to house the Time Stone, but even apart from that, it's still a very powerful object. The reason it was used to house the Time Stone is because it could protect it. It didn't derive its power from the Time Stone. Now, this monster is trying to take away America's powers. This whole plot line was actually set up in Wanda Vision. In Agatha Harkness's origin story, she is accused of,
"You practice the darkest of magic."
And later we see that she possesses the Darkhold.
Oh yeah, talk about the Darkhold. What's that?
Look, I'm going to explain the Darkhold in just a little bit, believe me. So, Agatha was able to use this unnatural power of the Darkhold to suck the life force and powers from her fellow witches.
So she's like a magic vampire?
All vampires are magic, but whatever.
Morbius isn't magic.
Actually, you know, that's true, but hey, do you know what Morbius and Salvador Dali have in common?
No, what?
Well, neither of them are in the MCU. So anyways, Agatha used this dark magic to try to absorb Wanda's power, and now Wanda is using it on America. America Chavez is also produced pretty faithfully from the comics, where she's actually from a dimension outside the multiverse called the Utopian Parallel. Now, just like we see in the movie, she had two moms, but they didn't appear accidentally. Long story short, they sacrificed themselves to save the Utopian Parallel and move it into the regular multiverse. And in the comics, instead of her moms being lost in the multiverse, it's her sister Catalina. And I just gotta say, superhero origins have gotten way weirder. When I was a kid, it was like, hey, here's a geek and he gets bit by a spider, so now he's like a spider.
Man, you sound like an old man now.
Yeah, I do kind of sound like an old man.
In my day, if a fella wanted ant powers, he just made himself an ant suit and that was that.
All right, moving on. Her jacket is taken straight from the comics, but I believe they added this pride flag pin, a nod to her being a lesbian in the comics, and the phrase amor es amor is written on her jacket, Spanish for love is love. Very cool. And the star-shaped portals that she creates are also taken straight from the books. So Defender Strange is willing to sacrifice her, and he says, in the grand calculus of the multiverse, your sacrifice is worth more than your life.
Now that sounds familiar.
Yes, because Steven said something very similar to Peter Parker in No Way Home.
In the grand calculus of the multiverse, their sacrifice means infinitely more than their lives.
And this is not just a throwaway Easter egg. It's showing that the MCU Strange is willing to make these same kinds of sacrifices. First, he's letting supervillains die. Next, he's killing a teenage girl. And these same hard calls are made by other Stevens across the multiverse, like Illuminati Steven and Evil Steven. And we saw this in the show What If with Strange Supreme.
Nothing is impossible. You taught me that. I only require more power.
The first Doctor Strange movie showed us that Strange had to learn how to overcome his ego.
It's not about you.
But this movie shows us the root of that ego, that Strange doesn't trust anyone else to succeed. He's the smartest, the best, so it has to be him. He carries around the guilt of letting his sister die, which, by the way, also happened in the comics, Easter egg there for you. Because of that guilt, he feels like the weight of the world is always on his shoulders. He has to get more powerful so he can be the one to save everybody. So, Strange's arc in this movie is to overcome this weakness and learn to trust others. In the case of America Chavez, he has to learn that important lesson that all teachers have to learn, that he has to not take away her pencil and trust her to win the day. Or as Christine puts it, as a surgeon, he always had to be the one to hold the knife. His trust issues drove them apart in every reality. And, as a side note, delegating saving the world gives him more time to focus on his own happiness, but more on that later.
I was so excited to see Patrick Stewart's Professor X finally in the MCU, but
Even this variant of Chuck still lost his hair, which actually must mean that Apocalypse uses him in every reality. I mean, that's a shame, because someone could have told Charles that the best way to prevent hair loss was to start when you still have hair left. And that's why I use Keeps, the sponsor of this week's video. See, there's a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I didn't waste any time. Treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results, so it is important to act fast, and you'll have to start early and stick with it. So if your hair is starting to thin, don't put it off. Start using Keeps now. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you will save. It's even proven to work on a Vision scalp. Hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication, and they have more 5-star reviews than any of their competitors. So if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, do something about it now. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/screencrush or click the link in the description to get 50% off your first order. Now back to the Easter eggs. When Strange gets ready for Christine's wedding, he has to use magic to tie his tie because his hands are still crippled and can't manage the task. This is also probably why he had a goatee trim guide in his basement, as we saw in Spider-Man No Way Home. He puts on the watch that Christine gave him. Now symbolically, this watch is a reminder of the real life that he had to leave behind to become Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts. Metaphorically, this watch is saying that his old life is broken and that time stopped for that old Stephen when he had his accident. At the wedding, he runs into Dr. West from the first movie. He's played by Michael Stuhlbarg, one of the most underused actors in the MCU. Check him out in Boardwalk Empire or A Serious Man and you will see what I mean. Now, he goes through this sob story about being dusted in Infinity War, losing his cats and his brother, and then asks Stephen for reassurance that the losses were worth it. And this scene is important because it establishes a few things. One, that everything that happened on Titan is apparently common knowledge to everyone on Earth, and everyone knows that Strange gave Thanos the Time Stone. So Stephen must hear this from people constantly, from all sorts of people on the street and stuff, who blame him for their hardships during the blip. He definitely hears it later from Wanda, who had to watch Vision die twice because Stephen handed over the stone. A little later at the reception, he creates a glass of wine for Christine, just like how he made beer for Thor.
Yeah.
Then the wedding is interrupted by this giant monster who we thought in trailers was Shuma-Gorath. Now Shuma-Gorath is a Doctor Strange villain that travels through dimensions, and we probably saw it here in What If. But here's the thing, turns out the name Shuma-Gorath is actually owned by Heroic Signatures, the company that owns Conan the Barbarian. So there's like some weird rights issues there, which is why Marvel just called the thing by a different name, but it's essentially the same monster.
What name did they call it?
Actually, I think they named it after another monster, This Is Your Mom. So the fight gave us some fun Sam Raimi moments, like when America's on a ledge that breaks away, very similar to what keeps happening to people in the Spider-Man movies. Also, here's a real-life ad for the celestial magic of tea, which feels like it's in here because Doctor Strange is magic, but I could be reaching on that. When Strange fights the monster, he breaks its invisibility spell. Now, this actually seems a lot like the invisibility spell that was cloaking the jackals that served Ammit and Moon Knight, except that in that show, Khonshu's avatars can see the monster because it's tied to the same power as Khonshu. I'm willing to bet that because this monster is protected by runes, if there were a witch there, say Agatha or Wanda, they would be able to see the monster when no one else could. Then Wong shows up and summons a sword of pure energy, which seems a lot like the maneuver that Athena used to summon her sword. And then they defeat the monster, Kenny Powers style.
I was aiming for his f***ing eye!
After the battle, Strange and Wong tell America about their multiversal experiences and the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. I appreciated that she asked if his wedding came out of his butt, kind of like the Brown Widow in Venture Brothers. Stephen is also still sore that he's not Sorcerer Supreme, like we saw in No Way Home.
He got it on a technicality because I blipped for 5 years.
Though this is actually more than just a gag for the movie. Like I said earlier, Strange thinks that he's LeBron. He's the best player on the team, the guy who should always have the ball. He wants the title of Sorcerer Supreme so he can have access to all the tools to defend reality. For instance, Wong talks about the super secret books that only the Sorcerer Supreme is allowed to read. America Chavez reveals that when people dream, they're actually dreaming of their multiversal selves. Now, this could mean that every time an MCU character has dreamed, they're actually seeing the lives of their multiversal selves. I have a lot of thoughts on this that I'm going to go over in our Plot Holes Explained video, but one thing in particular stood out. This could explain one particularly realistic dream that Tony Stark had.
I dreamt. We had a kid. So real. We named him after your eccentric uncle. What was his name?
Right.
Morgan.
Tony might have been dreaming about a variant of him from another universe who was happily married with a kid, and this made him want to have his own daughter and name her Morgan. Then they pieced together that the monster was covered with runes like we saw in Wanda Vision. And then, as we transition to Wanda, we hear the beginning of the Wanda Vision theme song. So, on to Wanda. Some fans are upset that the movie completely seems to undo her arc in WandaVision. You know, the whole show was about her going through the 5 stages of grief and then coming to terms with Vision's death. But remember, the show ended with her using the Darkhold, the most evil book ever that possesses people, and the book shows her a vision of her kids. So, at the end of WandaVision, the Darkhold was already manipulating and possessing Wanda. Now, Wanda's arc in this movie is a lot like the comic book Avengers Disassembled. So, long story short, in the comics, Wanda married Vision and the two of them had twins. Years later, she discovers the twins weren't real and they were actually shards of Mephisto's soul, and then they disappear. But she loses all memory of them. So, in Avengers Disassembled, she regains the memory of her children, and this knowledge drives her insane and she goes off and kills several Avengers. This leads into the story House of M, where she remakes reality into something more perfect for her. So the MCU is telling these same stories just a little out of order, because WandaVision was the MCU version of House of M. So here she creates the illusion that she is keeping an orchard, which is appropriate for 2 reasons. One, this shows her as a person who is trying to bear fruit, literally, with these trees. But also, she's trying to regain her sons, who are the fruit of her loins, so to speak. But also, pruning the branches of these trees is like pruning the branches of the multiverse that we saw in Loki. This is foreshadowing that soon she will travel across these branches of the multiverse through the Darkhold. Strange says,
I knew sooner or later you'd show up.
I'm not here to talk about Westview.
And funny story, originally those cryptic commercials in WandaVision were intended to be messages from Stephen Strange into the Hex to help Wanda through her grief. But then the creators scrapped that idea. In Wanda's dream, her boys are wearing blue and red just like they did in the show. Now this is a nod to the comics, where they become the teenage heroes Wiccan and Speed, and those are their primary colors. When Strange meets up with Wanda, she tries to play it cool, acting like she doesn't know what the multiverse is.
Viz had his theories.
And remember, Viz was her nickname for the Vision. A little later, she says the Hex was easy, but lying was hard, which is interesting. First of all, it means that Darcy's name for the Hex stuck.
It's what I'm calling the anomaly because of its hexagonal shape. It's starting to catch on.
Well done, Darcy. But also, she's acknowledging that she was lying to Vision within the Hex.
I don't know how any of this started in the first place.
Now, during our WandaVision coverage, we speculated on how much Wanda knew and when did she know it. Now it seems like she was pretty much aware from the start that she created a lie to be with him. Now, when Steven tries to recruit her, she says to use some other Avengers, and he says, oh, like the Archer or the Bug-themed heroes, which is a dig at Hawkeye, Spider-Man, Ant-Man, and the Wasp. But there's also War Machine, Hulk, Captain America. I mean, look, they're not the 27 Yankees, but they got some hitters. Then Wanda transforms reality into her red chaos world, and she's wearing her Scarlet Witch costume. Now, I never did point this out in our WandaVision coverage, but the piece here on her chest is in the shape of Vision's Mind Stone. It's a way of showing that his memory is always close to her heart. When Steven sees the Darkhold, he calls it the Book of the Damned, which is a fun connection to Sam Raimi's Evil Dead. That features another evil book, the Necronomicon, which was called the Book of the Dead. Now, the Darkhold actually first appeared kind of in Doctor Strange. In the forbidden section of the library at Carmartage, there's one book here that's missing. This could be where the Darkhold was supposed to go. Now, the Darkhold's history is tied very closely to Wanda in the comics, so I'm going to go over this because a lot of it is relevant in this movie. In the comics, Earth used to be controlled by these super powerful beings called the Elder Gods, and the most powerful and evil one of them was called Chthon. He became the first dark magician and is the originator of chaos magic. That's the force that powers the Scarlet Witch.
This is chaos magic, Wanda. And that makes you the Scarlet Witch.
The Elder Gods eventually turned into demons and monsters, except for Gaia.
The spirit of the earth.
She gave birth to a god-eater called Adam with a T, who cleansed the earth of these demons. But before Chthon left Earth, he poured all of his hatred and malice into the Darkhold.
Like the One Ring?
Exactly like the One Ring. So, over the years, he tries various ways to escape exile and return to Earth. He did this through a portal on Wundagore Mountain, which is also in this movie. Now, I'm gonna get really weird on you for a second. Wanda is also the place where a scientist called the High Evolutionary built a refuge for his evolved animal experiments, who he called Animen. When Chthon entered the world, these half-man, half-animal warriors fought him off with future technology and also swords from King Arthur's time. Actually, that's part of it, but I'm a little fuzzy on the details. What is important is that the moment Chthon was pushed back into the void is right when Wanda and Pietro were born on Wanda Mountain. So, Chthon put a bit of his essence inside of her, which allowed him to control her later in life. So, in this movie, it really is Wanda being taken over by Chthon and the Darkhold. So, in all of your Wanda Vision theory videos, you can cross Mephisto off the title and write Chthon. He's actually been the big bad who's been manipulating Wanda with chaos magic all along. What? Except in the MCU, Chthon tempts her with being reunited with her boys. So then Carmitage prepares to go to war as we see sorcerers arrive from the sanctums in London and China. You might have also recognized this wizard from Doctor Strange, and his name is Master Hamir. Now, this giant bull man is straight from the comics. His name is Rentra, and he is an alien from the planet Reval. And I love that the MCU is so weird now that we can have a cow man randomly in the background of this scene that requires no explanation. Any other movie would just be about the cowman. Now there's a part of this battle when Wanda gets in the heads of the soldiers, and they visualize this by having her stand right next to him, appearing out of nowhere, the same way that she influenced minds in Age of Ultron. That is a pretty neat visual callback. And oh god, that scene where Wanda escaped the mirror dimension by like unfolding herself like Pennywise, scary as hell. In fact, this whole movie's scary as hell. The battle goes south, and Strange and America fly through the multiverse as they first travel through a reality where there are cubes, then paint, then this kind of weird Art Deco world where people still travel by blimps. And by the way, this street is actually in Dumbo in NYC, and this is a huge tourist photo spot. Next is a world filled with crisscrossing towers in the sky that almost seems like it's influenced by Egyptian architecture, judging by this stone temple. Future Blade Runner world, future sky world, lava world, pipe world, like level 7 of Super Mario Bros. 3. And this is one of my favorites. Those big floating heads look like the Living Tribunal, who was teased in Doctor Strange 1.
This is the staff of the Living Tribunal.
The Living Tribunal is the ultimate cosmic arbiter in Marvel Comics. He has the final say in anything that transpires. For instance, he had the power to say that the Infinity Gems could no longer work as one, making the Infinity Gauntlet useless. Also, at one point during the road trip, we spotted a taxi ad for Grindhouse Releasing. That's a company that's owned by Bob Murawski, this movie's editor. There's also an animated universe at one point, which is cool because it means that What If might be set in a universe where everything just happens to be two-dimensional. Then they land in the 838 reality and run afoul of Bruce Campbell playing Pizza Papa. Campbell is one of Sam Raimi's best friends. He's the star of his early Evil Dead films and gave us the best Marvel cameos in the Spider-Man trilogy. And here, Strange makes him keep hitting himself, hitting himself, hitting himself. This is actually a nod to Evil Dead 2, when Ash's hand is possessed and he has to fight it off. After their journey, America says she's surprised Strange didn't throw up. Actually, people always say that.
Most people vomit the first time.
Strange responds that this isn't his first weird trip, and he's probably referring to this.
Open your eyes.
They take a brief trip down memory lane where we see America's origin, getting stung by a bee and triggering her powers. I thought this was a neat metaphor for the multiverse itself, kind of like the butterfly effect. We have no idea what tiny events will trigger changes in the timeline and create new realities. Now, the statue of Illuminati Strange calls him Earth's mightiest hero, which is what the Avengers are called in the comics. Across the street, there is a bookstore called MacLeod Books, referring to Marvel Comics artist Bob MacLeod, who co-created the New Mutants. Then we meet this reality's Baron Karl Mordo. His name is Karl in the comics too, and he poisons America and Strange. Afterwards, America asks what's in that tea, echoing this line from Steven.
What's in that tea? Psilocybin? LSD?
It's just tea. With a little honey.
Then Wong and Wanda venture to the origin of the Darkhold, Mount Wundagore. Now, I loved how the runes in this temple not only look like the runes in WandaVision, but also the runes that describe the Scarlet Witch in the Darkhold. The statue of the Scarlet Witch even looks like the drawing of her from that book. And of course, the altar that Wanda meditates on, the hexagon.
Not the beast! Ah!
In fact, there are hexagons like all over the temple. So early I talked about Chthon, but I didn't mention these monsters. I believe these are the Ngari. They're a race of demons that the Elder Gods kind of morphed into, and they all serve Chthon. Back at the Illuminati headquarters, things really start heating up with these Easter eggs. Christine reveals that it's her job to name different realities, and she's called the main MCU timeline Earth 616. And now that is also the designation of the main Marvel Comics universe. Previously, Marvel had said that the movie is happening in universe 199999, but now it looks like the movie universes and the comic universes are two totally separate entities. Christine also says that she is a senior fellow at the Baxter Foundation. Now, the Baxter Foundation is a scientific think tank that was created in the Fantastic movie universe to nurture young scientific minds. In the comics, the Fantastic Four's first headquarters was in the Baxter building. Now, I am a huge Fantastic Four fan. This is one of my many Doctor Doom action figures, and all of this made me giddy. Then we meet the Illuminati, who are different from how they appear in the comics, even though some of their members are the same. In the comics, the Illuminati is a secret organization of leaders of several different hero teams. See, they coordinate their efforts without telling the other heroes, and this allows them to make some hard choices, like when they exiled the Hulk into outer space. So here, they seem more like this Earth's Avengers, although they do still punish other heroes and then lie about it. Their fortress is guarded by Ultron bots.
But wait, Tony Stark created Ultron. Is he in this universe?
Well, no. I mean, not that we know of. I think it's possible that in this universe, Ultron was created by Reed Richards. After all, Hank Pym created Ultron in the comics. But because Reed is much smarter than Tony and has a stronger moral center, his creation didn't become a murder bot. Then we meet Captain Carter, who first appeared in What If. And when she first appears, we briefly hear the theme from First Avenger. Now, I don't think that this is the Captain Carter from What If. The whole point of a multiverse is that you can have an infinite number of these characters and then kill them off for fun. Then we meet Maria Rambeau, who became Captain Marvel in this reality. Clearly, in this universe, she's the one who took the flight with Mar-Vell instead of Carol. And for me, the biggest surprise of the movie was the return of Black Bolt from that awful Inhuman show. Don't get me wrong, Inhuman comics are great. Black Bolt, the character, is great. The show, bad.
Never.
And next up, the fan casting that everybody wanted to see, John Krasinski as Reed Richards. Krasinski and Marvel Studios have been dancing around each other for a few years now. He was actually originally up for the role of Steve Rogers and lost out to Chris Evans. And people have been wanting to see him play Reed Richards for years. Now, if he is playing Reed in the new Fantastic Four movie that's set in the main MCU timeline, I'm not sure this is the right way to introduce him, but it is a really cool, fun nod to the fans. It shows Marvel is listening to us. But I kind of don't want to see him play Reed now. Who do you want to see play Reed Richards in the next movie? Let me know down in the comments below. So, Reed arrives through a floating energy square, and this is actually how Doctor Doom's time machine is portrayed in the comics. Maybe Reed was arriving from some time-traveling adventure, or he's repurposed this technology to be a teleporter in this universe. When Strange hears the name Fantastic Four, he asks if they charted in the 60s. Now remember, Strange is a massive fan of dad rock.
Feels so good. Chuck Mangione, 1977. Honestly, Billy, you said this one would be hard.
But also mentioning the 60s is a nod to when the FF first appeared. So then they start to talk about incursions and how they affect the multiverse. Now this is actually a major plot point from the 2015 storyline Secret Wars. Now we did cover this extensively in our Indian Explained video, but an incursion happens when two universes collide. And in the comics, the only way to save one universe is to destroy another. Now we could see this play out in the great multiversal war that was hinted at in Loki.
Countless unique timelines battled each other for supremacy, nearly resulting in the total destruction of, well, everything.
This is probably leading Marvel into their next big crossover event movie, with everyone from every movie in every universe everywhere fighting Kang in just a few years. Then the final member of the Illuminati is revealed, the return of Patrick Stewart as Professor Xavier. Now when he rolls in, they play the theme from the X-Men animated series. And dear God, I hope this means they will use that theme song in the new movies. It is like my favorite superhero theme right after Superman. He's in a yellow hover chair from that series, but this chair was actually first drawn by Jim Lee in the comics. Xavier uses his powers to show Strange a memory of the Illuminati on Titan, killing his variant. So it appears that, in this reality, the Illuminati united to stop Thanos on Titan before he actually got the gauntlet. Now we see this variant of Strange has blackened fingers, indicating that, like Wanda, he's been using the Darkhold. And In this case, he used it to kill Thanos. And remember, we saw the same blackening of the fingers in Wanda Vision. And in Wanda Vision, we saw that when Agatha uses the Darkhold to steal the powers of others, their skin turns black as well. I think this is indicating that the Darkhold is actually pulling the energy out of Wanda and Strange as they attempt to use it. Another way of showing that it's parasitic and feeding off these heroes. And then Wanda shows up and gives us some good old-fashioned Sam Raimi ultra-violence. This sequence where Wanda slaughters the Illuminati reminded me of the original What If comics. Part of the appeal of those books like Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe is that you had no limit and you could watch these heroes die in like hundreds of inventive ways. So, before this fight begins, Reed tells Wanda that he is a parent, hinting at the MCU existence of Franklin and Valeria Richards in this universe. And he also mentions their mother, Susan Storm Richards. Then, the bloodbath begins. Wanda liquefies Reed, closes Black Bolt's mouth so his powers are redirected back into his skull. And then Peggy steps up and delivers Cap's signature line.
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
Afterwards, Wanda gives her a good having exactly what happened to Zombie Steve in What If. Now, this whole scene seems very inspired by the climactic prom scene in Brian De Palma's Carrie. Now, in that scene, Carrie White unleashes her latent psychic powers to murder a bunch of her classmates. And she does this drenched in pig's blood. But in this scene, the blood splatters across half of Wanda's face. It looks cool, but it's also a subtle way to indicate that the Darkhold doesn't yet have full control of her soul.
There is still good in him.
Then Professor X encounters Wanda inside her own mind. Now, this could be the MCU's version of the astral plane. Now, in the comics, this is a plane of reality where the Professor can engage directly with other people's minds. This is kind of like the astral forms we've already seen people take in the MCU.
You entered the astral dimension.
What?
A place where the soul exists apart from the body.
In this scene, Charles tries to free the mind of the suppressed Wanda who is trapped under rubble. No doubt this relates to her childhood trauma of being trapped in her home and staring at the Stark shell. After Wanda kills the Professor, guy has no luck with redheads, Strange, Christina, and America go to Gap Junction. No, that's not a Gap superstore. We're going to explain it in just a second. Strange has to unlock this store with the broken watch that Christine gave him because this junction is guarding the greatest treasure in the multiverse, and to him, she is the most important person in the multiverse. So they describe the Gap Junction as a meeting point of several realities. So this, to me, kind of sounds like the nexus of all realities from Marvel Comics. It's a place where the multiverses intersect and join together. They're pursued by Wanda, who bursts through the door looking inhuman, almost like the zombie Wanda that we saw in What If. Then they escape to a reality that's been destroyed by an incursion. Now this actually looks a lot like the reality that Strange Supreme destroyed in What If. If you'll remember, that reality was destroyed because Steven tried to reverse an absolute point in time. Basically, an event so important it was necessary for existence to continue. In that case, it was Christine's death which caused the origin of Stephen Strange. Now, that destruction of that universe was immediate, but here we see that incursions take a lot longer. It's more like reality is rotting away. And the person responsible for this is the evil Sinister Strange.
Things just got out of hand.
Now, one thing I really liked about this movie is that the Doctor Strange variants all serve to further the character of our Stephen Strange. They're not just like wacky variants like the Gremlins in Gremlins 2. Each of them shows a different Stephen that has succumbed to evil, but at varying degrees. So the movie opens with Ponytail Strange deciding to murder America for the greater good. Illuminati Strange just barely used the Darkhold, but he had started to live his life on the dark side.
Good.
In What If, Strange Supreme shows us a version of the character who will stop at nothing to gain power for what he thinks is the ultimate good. And Sinister Strange is just full-on evil. He could never find a reality where he and Christine were happy together, so he hates himself. He hates himself so much that he goes through the multiverse killing his variants. And this is all because of Stephen's great flaw, that he believes that only he can fix the universe's problems, and his arc of the movie is learning how to trust others to help. Although, you know, the Ancient One also had to use forbidden power to guard reality, drawing energy from the dark dimension. So maybe being the Sorcerer Supreme means that you have to use both white and black magic, finding a balance between the two. So what all of this is really saying is that Baron Zemo is right. These people have too much power and they need to be kept in check. And then, Sinister Strange gets Saruman'd. But afterwards, his third eye still opens. This is showing that the evil of the Darkhold is still inside his dead body, foreshadowing that our Stephen will soon use the Darkhold to reanimate his own corpse. And the best moment in the movie is when Strange gives an inspirational speech as a zombie.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom.
Also, I know that the What If Marvel Zombies episode said that the zombies were caused by a virus, but what if the zombies were actually caused by the power of the Darkhold possessing a corpse? We could be looking at patient zero for the zombies right here. When America finally has the confidence to use her powers, she puts one fist inside an open palm, her signature move from the comics. And I loved that she won by outsmarting Wanda, the same way that Strange outsmarted Dormammu in the first movie.
This is how things are now. You and me, trapped in this moment, endlessly.
So America shows Wanda's children the monster that she has become. And by the way, when they enter the other reality, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is playing on the background. Now this shocks Wanda back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. And she decides to make amends by destroying Wundagore and purging the Darkhold from the multiverse. But as we see in the post-credits scene, this does not purge the Darkhold's energy from Stephen. He's still got that third eye. This means that the energy of Chthon still has an anchor in the multiverse. It's inside of Wanda, it's inside of Strange, and any other sorcerer who used its power, like Agatha. Afterwards, Stephen is able to tell Christine that he loves her and he fixes his watch, meaning that now he's ready to move on and resume his life. Basically, he's giving himself permission to finally be happy. He even accepts his place as Wong's subordinate, finally bowing to him. And all this personal growth happens just in time for Clea to appear. Now, we covered this in our Ending Explained video, but Clea is actually the niece of Dormammu in the comics. She's a being called a Faltine. That's a race that is extremely powerful. She was once the Sorcerer Supreme, both on Earth and in the Dark Dimension. And kind of important here, she's also been married to Stephen in the comics. She asked Stephen to help fight against incursions, meaning that the two of them are going to go gallivanting around the multiverse, setting up the next big crossover event, which is probably Secret Wars. Now, this whole storyline about incursions is taken from the comics arc Time Runs Out. That's where Stephen actually also had a third eye. Also, and I just have to mention, Stephen did have a third eye in the early comics that was representing seeing into the spiritual realm or seeing into people's souls. This is why the Ancient One says, open your eye.
Open your eye.
So we think this is setting up Strange and Clea going around the multiverse trying to stop incursions and realizing that a multiversal war is on the horizon. And who's behind that multiversal war?
This is wild.
Kang the Frickin' Conqueror. So if you want more information about Clea or Secret Wars, check out our Ending Explained video. But that is all the Easter eggs that we found. If you guys found any, let us know in the comments below, or you can @ me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and ring the bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.